Welcome to The Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this series, we're going to be talking about predatory publishers. We are nothing without academic integrity, and predatory publishing practices threaten to undermine a scholarly communications environment that, these days, needs public faith and trust more than ever. My guest and I will be discussing the motives, archetypes, and deceptive practices of predatory publishers, so stay tuned in this four-part series for some valuable intel to help you safely navigate the academic publishing landscape. Joining me on this series, which is brought to you with generous support from Cabells, are Ashley Carroll, Project Manager at Cabells, Ruth Bailey, Journal Auditor, Mike Bisaccio, Director of Marketing and Communications, and Yasmeen Zubair, Journals Manager at Cabells. I should note that the Cabells team recently presented a webinar with Choice on predatory publishing, which is freely accessible on demand at the Choice Media channel on YouTube. In this final episode of our series, we look at the effect open access has had on predatory publisher practices and what researchers need to know as they consider their publishing options. Looking ahead, we mentioned open access earlier and how that is kind of, through no fault of its own, really provided some opportunities, I guess, for journal predatory publishers. But I guess, and Ruth, I'm wondering if you could talk to how that OA has generally impacted the predatory market. How are they exploiting that?
Yeah, so I think through the development of open access, authors have become familiar with the process of paying article publication charges. So it doesn't feel unusual if a journal has that as a way of publishing. They kind of,
Right.
it's easy for them. They're familiar with it. And it's this element of open access which predatory journals are exploiting. They can also claim to meet the requirements that are, so if a fund has specified that this article needs to go in a certain repository or it needs to be posted in a certain place, then they can say that they'll do that. Whether they do it or not is another matter, but they can kind of, again, meet that need. Also, the very nature of open access articles, because anyone can view them, then predatory journals can copy them and use them, as a body, and claim that they're part of the body of the work of that journal. And so we do find that articles be reused in different predatory journals. I'd say most, although not all of the journals that are in predatory reports are listed as open access. So unfortunately, it does mean that money from funders is going towards predatory journals. This is definitely not a critique of open access at all, though. I think
right.
what it is it underlines the fact that researchers really need to be able to differentiate between legitimate and predatory journals when they're thinking about, which open access journal they're going to submit their research to, because they don't want those funds to go to the wrong place. And also they don't want their reputation and their article to be tarnished by connection with these publishers, with these journals.
Yep. Yeah. So speaking of, what researchers need to know, what would you say to them if you had an opportunity to speak to a room full of researchers? What should they consider? When they're looking at publication options and where they are reading other published research.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is just look really closely at the journal that you're submitting to, and bear in mind the adage: if it looks too good to be true, then it probably is. I
Right.
think that's it's a really good piece of advice. It's really important to make sure that you ask questions about the journal. If you haven't heard of it, speak to your peers, speak to other researchers. Ask questions on online forums. I think you pretty soon get a response if people have had a bad experience with a journal. They're keen to share that with other researchers. I think a really good piece of advice is to reach out to the editor or to the editorial board. if they're genuinely involved in that journal, they should be happy to talk to researchers about whether their article is right for the journal. If there's a contact listed for the journal, get in touch with them. Just don't ignore suspicions about the journal.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Mike or Ashley, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so something quick that I would add is that researchers really should aim to be aware of the top publications and journals, and also researchers in their own respective fields. So there is an element of accountability there as well. And, it's also wise to stay knowledgeable of paper retractions and known publishing schemes that are happening in your field areas as well. Paper retractions are often publicly made known. And so, quick Google search can probably help you figure if there have been paper retractions from a specific journal or not, or researcher even.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you'd be talking about like a high number of retractions, right? Not just one or two, I guess.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, mistakes can happen. Absolutely. Sure. Or data needs to be corrected. But yes, if suddenly you notice a journal has a few hundred paper retractions happening within a calendar year, then perhaps there's an issue. And I had actually just read a news article the other day that noted that in 2023, there were more than 20,000 paper retractions. So, that's a massive, massive number. But you can do a quick search on a journal that you were considering publishing your work in to see how many retractions they've had, certainly within a calendar year. Hopefully not 20,000.
Right. That's a lot.
Yeah, I would kind of echo what Ashley and Ruth have said. Really, I guess you could say one of the, a silver lining of predatory activity having been around for a few years now, there's no shortage of resources available to help someone understand what predatory journals are, most importantly, how to identify and avoid them. And as you said, not just avoid them when it comes to publishing their own research, but also where they're reading other published research upon which their work may be built. It's kind of what we mentioned earlier about, this research being diluted with some of this junk or pseudoscience. But there are also, so there are dozens and dozens of articles in publication on predatory journals, some how to identify them, some looking at the impact, or, the what to do if you become tangled up with one of these operations. There are also, as we've mentioned, free resources that, mean to include only legitimate titles and increase the visibility of quality peer-reviewed journals, such as a directory of open access journals or Think, Check, Submit, and COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics, as we've mentioned. Those are resources to support the publishing community through education, discussion, really just a wealth of resources focused on promoting ethical practices. So there's, some web searches can really uncover a lot of useful tools.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. And then if, aside from not publishing in that journal, if a researcher thinks they found a predatory journal out in the wild, how can they report them to you? How do they help others, find out about this journal?
Yeah, I'll Yasmeen can add to this. Real quickly, practically speaking, they can go to Cabells.com, our website, and we have a contact form they can fill out, be as specific as they want. We have fields for journal title, a notes section. They can be as specific as they want in the form, or they can just email us at journals@Cabells.com, and our wonderful journals team, will be in the mix and really will be able to, answer.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. Please feel free to contact us if you encounter these journals. Personally, I find investigating them fascinating, but more importantly, getting people aware of these predatory journals helps the research community as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And then, Finally, what we always like to do at the Authority File is circle back to the library. What do librarians in particular need to know as they support the library community, which of course includes the researchers? And Ashley, why don't we jump over to you for that?
Sure. So something that I like to say, because I believe it to be true, is that librarians are often the first line of defense when it comes to, stopping the spread of misinformation, or perhaps even in this case, it could be intervening before a researcher submits their work to a predatory journal. And with all aspects of librarianship, we continually respond to the needs of our users and our researchers. And right now, there is a great need because of the spread of predatory publishing and misinformation, particularly in digital spaces, because it's so easy, to proliferate this information. And so we know that predatory journals are never going to go away, but librarians could be a part of this, management solution, if you will. And reference and instruction librarians in particular are equipped to assist users in the critical stages of their research projects, because users typically come to librarians at either the beginning stage of their research process, when they haven't yet found sources, or when they're stuck and they need more or better sources. They're getting ready to submit their paper, whether it's to their professor or, perhaps to a publishing company. And so they need better sources than the ones that they have. And so it's at these moments that librarians can take an opportunity to educate their users, their researchers, on how to identify authoritative sources, how they can place authority in context, and how they can verify claims of, authority as well. And I think librarians should be less upset that misinformation exists, and instead take all of that energy and put it towards teaching their researchers how to spot it. So whether that's in the classroom or it's at the service desk, or, even if it's in a podcast episode like this too. And so please, librarians, be a part of the solution, assist your researchers, help them find credible sources and journals to which they can submit their research. So that would be my advice.
Yes, well said. Thank you for that. Well, that's all the time we have. So Yasmeen, Ashley, Ruth, and Mike, thank you so much for being on the program with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. It's been a blast.
Thanks. Yeah, it's
Thank
been
you.
great.
Thank you.
You just heard from Ashley Carroll, Project Manager at Cabells, Ruth Bailey, Journal Auditor at Cabells, Michael Bisaccio, Director of Marketing and Communications at Cabells, and Yasmeen Zubair, Journals Manager at Cabells. This episode was brought to you with generous support from Cabells. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising director, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant, Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.